Hey guys, I'm Kate. Welcome back to my channel, and today I want to talk about... Nope, wrong one. And today I want to talk about this beauty, aka Project Blue, aka the Meridian Maps, aka a novel I'm hoping to query starting in February. Oh my gosh. Its most recently completed form is actually a 4th draft. It's not even this draft. This was the 3rd draft. This is draft 4. For those of you guys who haven't been following along on this saga or are just now joining me in this channel, the Meridian Maps is my YA pirate fantasy novel. It follows Annalisa, who betrays her country and barters her way on board this pirate vessel. Not coincidentally, the people she helped to betray her country with. The shenanigans. A mix of dramatic antics ensue, both due to her present pirate-filled situation and also her past trying to catch up with her. The most recent I've talked about this project was in my Writing Life experiment video, because I was saying how I'm just now starting draft 5, and the biggest things about draft 5 that I need to change are 2 particular scenes. And the time before that, when I talked about Project Blue, it was way back when I was submitting for Pitch Wars, which I obviously did not get into, otherwise you would have heard more about that. But I haven't talked about Project Blue much since, because I waited the 2 months that I think you need between each draft, and then I kept waiting and kept waiting. An idea kind of dug its way into the back of my brain, and I kept having to ruminate over this idea. And maybe it wasn't an idea so much as like a realization of a problem. And a problem which, upon ultimately like fully digesting it, I realized had actually sort of been talked about way back when I got beta reader feedback on this guy in draft 3 version. You guys, this is exactly why you get feedback. But the big problem point was that I realized neither of my readers felt like this story was particularly young adult, and there was some talk about if that age range was right. And this is a tricky point within YA in general, especially YA fantasy has a hard time classifying if it's actually young adult or if it's just pure fantasy. And also a lot of characters on the pirate ship where she is for most of the story range up from like 25 to I think the youngest is about 17. So she's the youngest, also in a place where being young, like 16, doesn't really matter, and everyone else is older than her. But let me loop back in Pitch Wars for a second here. This is the part where, again, everything was ruminating in my brain. It was like waiting for things to click. And I don't want to say I'm ashamed of this. Like, nervous to talk about, I think is the right way to put it. Because mentors have specific like wish lists, things they want from the stories. And I saw a recurring theme on the wish list that made me pause. And now obviously these wish lists are a good idea because you don't want to send something to a contemporary author when your story is fantasy. And you don't want to send like a trope that someone really hates and knows they won't be able to help you with because they just don't like it. And that's nothing to do with your book. That's just not either their area of expertise or their preferred reading or whatever. Like, this is a great idea. But then they also had important things like trigger warnings and even farther just topics that they were uncomfortable with, didn't want to help with, didn't want to have to read, so you would not submit to those people. So in this draft, actually in this draft, in draft 4, the one that I was submitting for Pitch Wars, I had 2 instances of sexual assault would be taking it too far, and I think I already knew that, but also like I asked both of my beta readers and they thought I was being like overly sensitive to it. But I think it's important to be overly sensitive. So I didn't submit to those people who said that that was an issue for them and something they didn't want to read. But I really thought this through, and combined with my beta reader feedback, one of the scenes takes place in, it's not a brothel, that makes it sound like much older, but you know, a fantasy setting, a bar-ish kind of thing. And I realized that there was a way that I could age that down and take out the interaction that I was concerned about in this one scene. And it absolved all of my problems when all of that came together for me into a little nugget of an idea. I realized I could change it. And then when I looked at the other scene, which was much more clearly an attack, I realized that even though, this is the hard part about writing stories, it's important that an event takes place. The way that the main character and the other characters on board the ship react to it is important to kind of ground the reader in the changes that are soon to come on this pirate ship, if that makes any sense. If I'm making any sense, I think you guys can follow though. None of the scenes that I had written actually involved a sexual assault or anything like that, but the meditation behind the character's intentions, even though it didn't get to that point, I kind of realized, why do I need to have that in there? So really, none of the things that were written and none of the things I searched online for after I was looking this up and was like freaking out during Pitch Wars, like, what am I gonna do kind of thing. None of it really specifically addressed what I had written, but it struck a chord in me, and that's the important part as a writer, to absorb these kind of cues that you're brain, I guess, or outside forces are sending you and being like, okay, do I want to change this? And I decided I did. And the hard part comes in because as a writer, I want to make things realistic, but I also don't want to perpetuate any kind of negative concepts. And especially in a fantasy story not based on history, I can do whatever I freaking want. So it's kind of like pitch wars, soaking in information, beta reader feedback, all of these things culminated into me ultimately deciding that 2 scenes needed to be really reworked. Once I changed the 2 scenes, all of the changes hereafter are all like verbiage and word choice and the flow of the sentence. Like, it's all very minute things to make the story, which is really a full story at this point, to make the story read as best it can. And that means it won't take nearly as long as the 4 months I've been waiting on figuring out if this was a thing worth freaking out over or not. That's it. I am so close to done, which is why I set my goal to query in February. And then once I'm done with this part, which I'll just go ahead and say I'm hoping to be done with by the end of December because I've finished 1.5 of the scenes. I am so freaking pumped because it's getting so close to being as I've never made it so far along in the process when I'm looking at individual word choices, and so this is just really, really exciting. Oh my gosh. So I guess this was all just an update on draft 5, the things that I've kind of been thinking through and working through, things that I didn't even realize were going to be things I'd have to think through and work through because each story is different, even though my drafting process, drafting, redrafting, revision, editing, etc., is kind of fine-tuning itself into the ways that I personally like to do it. So I guess the questions that I'd like to pose to y'all: have you ever written something and then had an epiphany that caused you to rewrite multiple scenes? And has it ever happened very late in the drafting process? And also, have you ever written something like potentially problematic, recognized that it wasn't what you wanted to do, and changed it? But that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all very soon with a new video. Bye! Project Blue is almost done. Project Blue is almost done. It follows on Elisa, a traitor to her country, and knows they won't be able to hate you with. I don't even know where I was.